thousands of years of war and conflict and dealing with trauma behind them when they arrived. And they were disconnected from land, disconnected from country, disconnected from story, disconnected from ancient wisdom. And they brought with them hierarchical structures. And as an Aboriginal elder said to me, they had plenty of practice before they got here and they knew exactly what to do. And so, to understand that, I think, is really important, because what's considered to be normal mind is actually a mind that's adapted to a traumatized world. And I'd like to talk a little bit about trauma, what it does to the mind, and then I will introduce systems and what systems has to offer. Trauma is profoundly fracturing. It fractures people, it fractures society, it fractures community, and it fractures family. Raw trauma is characterized by very deep states of internal chaos and vulnerability that are absolutely terrifying to people. And so they want to retreat and get out of those chaotic states that are so terrifying. And we see all the maladaptive coping strategies, which is people, alcohol and substance abuse, self-destructive behaviours, risk-taking behaviours, keep your adrenaline levels up, you don't feel the trauma. Obsessive behaviours, if you can get obsessed on something, then you can hold the trauma out. People become overly sexualised, keep your sexual energy up, no room for the trauma. And so, and there's other aspects of that as well. The mind that is adapted to trauma, that we call the functional mind, there's some features about it. It has a need to have more to feel safe, a need to be in control to be safe. It is very externalised because perceived threats come externally. So external referencing, which interrupts internal referencing and internal connection. There's, as I say, there's many aspects of that, and I'm just going to skip across this. The thing about the need to be in control and the need to have more to be safe, as far as I can tell, has driven the development of dysfunctional aspects of capitalism, and it has driven the development of classic science, whose central thesis is command and control. It has driven top-down hierarchical structures. It has driven patriarchal structures. And so we see in our world, in our society, of the many consequences is the rise of the expert who knows what's best for other people. And we see this through absolutely everything. And my profession is full of it. People who are making decisions about what normal is, what health is, how other people should live their life, and what their values should be. Our government does it, top down. Now, it's also given rise to the individual style of leadership that is so prevalent in the Western world. At times of crisis, we need powerful individual leaders. What has happened in our society and the Western world, as far as I can see, is that they perpetuate crisis, so that type of leadership is needed. And so the conflict that exists in our culture is, I don't see that being actively resolved. Conflict, I see it being fed. Conflict across genders, across cultures, across socio-economic status, and by keeping people in conflict, this individual style of leadership is free to run its agendas in the way that it does. So this command and control approach has been incredibly destructive, and we only need to take a look around us in the world to see how well that's going. All of the major systems, all of the global systems are becoming increasingly unstable. Environmental, political, social, financial, and so on. Systems science and systems thinking provides an insight into what's actually happening that has been very valuable for me. And what it does is it shows me a way forward. Systems science has been going on for some years. It's classical science doesn't like it because it shows that the assumptions that classical science are built on are actually wrong. Their ideas of causality, how they view things, they're wrong. And that classical science is an incomplete science, a mechanistic view of the world. And so there is so much academic investment in classical science, so much financial investment, reputation investment, that it's still promoted and maintained, even though it's destructive. Fortunately, the groundswell around systems and systems thinking has been building over the past 20 or 30 years. And it's pointed to as the way forward for a sustainable and equitable future. It removes the hierarchies, it brings equality. Living systems are in nature, and so in systems thinking, and when we're working with systems, we are working in alignment with the natural living systems that are in nature. They have many, many qualities, but perhaps the most useful thing is to describe the behaviour of one aspect of the behaviour of these systems. Is you can build them or they can occur naturally. All the research is in on this, there's no question about it. Is with a system like this, when they model them or they create them or study them, if you provide a constant input of energy into that system that is unchanging, the system with its feedback loops and one thing and another will very quickly settle into the most efficient way it can to process that energy and output behaviour. And one of the things that defines them is they will seek stability and they will seek processing efficiency unless something's stopping them. And what happens as you begin to increase the energy input into these systems and you actually drive them harder is the internal processing patterns that they've adopted will stay the same. But as you drive them harder with increasing energy input, they start to become unstable and lose efficiency. At some stage, in that when they're stable, you can nudge the system and it'll wobble a bit and come back to stability. It'll return to stability and efficiently very quickly. When it's at one of these points of instability, you can nudge the system very slightly and it will wobble all over the place and may or may not return to stability, and it can tip into chaotic states. When it tips into a chaotic, and eventually they will reach a chaotic state, and that's the science of chaos theory. Chaos theory is one aspect of system science, complex system science. There are 5 possible outcomes when a system reaches this point. A system will self-destruct, it can stay chaotic, it can split, it's called bifurcation in the science, so it will split into independent systems that cope with the increased energy. And we see that happening, you see this happening in the world stage. There are places that are chaotic. Middle East is as chaotic as anything. There's self-destruction. You'll see this right down to the individual level of individuals in society as well. The splitting, moment is disrupting relationships with other countries and trying to remove America from those relationships to regain its power. So that's a splitting. Another thing that will happen is aware systems will attempt to return to previous states of stability, and that's the cry of let's go back to the way we used to be and everything will be okay. You cannot reverse systems like that, it's impossible. And the fifth outcome is the systems can do a complete reorganisation and transformation, usually into more complexity and higher ordered processing, and again become stable and efficient and able to deal with that increased processing demand. If you keep driving the system, then it will reach that point again, where it reaches these chaotic points with those outcomes. What determines whether a system can do that transformation is it has to have what's called onboard potential. And onboard potential is really like organising principles. Does the system have the intelligence within it to make that transformation? And you'll have heard perhaps the word non-linear and non-linear shifts. These systems are non-linear. They will stay the same, they'll hit one of these points and suddenly they'll shift. And the regen farmers, the soil scientists supporting regenerative agriculture, Martin Stapper, who I know, Charles Massey, Terry McCosker, they are all systems people. And it's systems that is driving regenerative agriculture. It is systems knowledge that is driving the new health service delivery that's taken place in Europe in some countries. It is systems that is driving the shift in the education model in Europe. And so you may have heard they now have schools where there is no curriculum. The students develop the curriculum through discussion, develop their own learning pathways. They're involved in all the decision making, and their graduates are well equipped and self-responsible and self-learners. So it has tremendous application. In working with it, the big challenge is to make the shift from the way we think to systems thinking. And you can get it intellectually, but you actually have to let your mind reorganise. So a lot of my work is seminars, workshops, training programs to shift people into systems thinking. And as one of the pioneers and the famous researchers said, anyone who claims they fully understand systems, they don't, because they just keep revealing their properties. There is a growing movement around this. There have been a lot of people working with it in isolation in different parts of the world. There are many businesses, including corporations, that have adopted self-organising structures. A feature of these is their flexibility and adaptability. And so businesses who have a system structure are very flexible and adaptable. Everyone in the system is valued for what they contribute in the business, and they are able to respond to changing demands in their environment. I think that the change that's going to come is not going to come from the top down. The politicians are too locked into command and control. They are too compromised to the corporate world. And they give us all their false promises, get elected, and do what they do, taking care of their corporate mates mostly. What I see happening is there is a groundswell going on as people are waking up and are demanding change. And people are adopting systems approaches, whether they know it or not. And so there is an increasing need and market for systems information. I work with an ex-CEO from the corporate world who I'd been teaching systems for about 7 years. We provide system services to businesses and organisations. I take my systems knowledge into my work with my Aboriginal friends, my brothers and sisters, as I've come to know them to be. It has enabled a connection with land. It has enabled a connection with country. All systems have their entire history encoded within them. And so the planet is a system. And so when Aboriginals say all knowledge is in country, it is. And when you are connected in a systems way with country, begins that knowledge is revealed. And so it is a very powerful thing, a very powerful exploration, but the biggest challenge is to shift our thinking. We are born into a colonist mindset, whether we like it or not. Colonisation continues. Big difference between Aboriginal people and us is they know they're being colonised. We have no idea that we have been colonised, and we continue to be colonised because it's been going on for so long. These days it's happening through financial system, education system, agriculture, so on and so forth. So to conclude this, this is not something that we need to make happen. It's actually happening, and there is this natural shift going on, and people are waking up, and they are starting to connect up with each other. So all of these people that have been working in isolation with systems, it's reached a point where we're all starting to find out who they are, and we're forming our networks, and we're sharing the knowledge and information. And so out of that will come another system that change will emerge from. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Does anyone have any questions for John? I'm sure they do. Anyone? Bueller?
I just feel really excited about what you're saying. And the work that I do is a lot about control because of the world people enter into in terms of medicine and oncology. And trying to help influence, well not influence, it's not the right word, but trying to help people realise that there's a lot of organicness about life and about health. It's just really exciting to hear what you're saying. Thank you.
Absolutely. One of the features of systems is a property called entrainment. That's not well understood. You hear people talk, what happens is people understand this stuff from this mechanical mindset, and then they use it in a command and control way, which is inconsistent with systems thinking and systems theory. So you see that in these entrainment technologies where they can drive your brain to look like whatever they want it to look like. They're using entrainment, but in a command and control strategy. The meditation that we did is about entrainment, connecting people in heart space so that they start to entrain. Entrain means that a smaller system, when it comes into the presence of a larger or stronger system, if it connects with it the right way, will naturally start to process information that way. It will shift. So when we go into nature, if we connect with healthy nature the right way, we will entrain with it, and our processing will change, and our system, we will start to return to health. And so there's a whole lot of research around that in eco-psychology. Indigenous people know this. So yep, nature's a very powerful healer. One of the things I do is take people out into nature and teach them how to connect with it.
Do you think there is a position for hierarchy in the systems though?
Yep.
And some level of control?
Yeah, one of the things about systems is that there's everything is useful. It depends on context. And so there is times when hierarchical structures are useful. like in times of crisis, hierarchical leadership. The firefighters that I work with who are attending accidents, without that, they would not be able to do their work. They need command, they need chains of command, they need authority, they need to be able to trust each other. It works so well in the coalface that they use it right through the organisation. It doesn't work very well in the rest of the organisation.
One last question.
How does organised religion fit in with systems thinking?
Religion, in the way that I see it, has been corrupted by the command and control, the need for power, the need to have more, in the way that other social systems have been corrupted. And so that's the short answer. Does that?
Yep, that's fine.
Very good, thank you, John. And we have a system here. Our guest speakers get a little.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks very